not bad for your first lap. Literally jumping into the car, going out of the pits. One acclimatization lap. Remember, 2 sets of tires. He will start on 2 brand new sets of Goodyear C compound tires. And I tell you, that is an impressive lap, just literally leaping into the car. He probably had a little snackette before he did that. And now just picking up the pace. 1 minute 39.008. And I think there's a lot more left in that Williams car and a lot more in Nigel Mansell.
And I say that time is quicker than anybody has gone, apart from Nigel Mansell this morning. 39.008. And I think that's Nigel's 26th pole position of his career.
Well, there really is nobody here this weekend who we would anticipate outpoling Nigel Mansell. Riccardo Patrese, his teammate, really is the man that should be getting closest to doing that. But Patrese, really throughout this season, has not come to terms with his actively suspended Williams. And just you see Mansell at the exit of the 3rd chicane running up the curb, but the car remains very undisturbed by that curb. Other cars are all over the circuit on the exit. Now coming in through the Agip turn down to this notorious Sachs curve. 3rd gear corner, banked. You've got to get in early, get the power on early, then drive the car out, then through the wiggle woggle, and then down finally into the Opal curve before you come onto the start-finish line. And this looks to me to be an improvement from Nigel Mansell. 38.340, over half a second quicker than he went this morning. Nigel Mansell's at it again.
38.340, that means he's only just a whisker away from that 37, which people think he's going to do today. Other people that have been out, Jean Alesi on a 1:42, which is quicker than he went this morning. And oh dear, Martin Brundle.
And that's a big problem for Martin Brundle, because if that engine is stalled, and here we a replay of that action, Martin losing control, coming into the chicane, over the curbs. We saw him do exactly the same thing this morning in the Opal curve in the stadium, but that's much, much more spectacular. That engine has taken a mouthful of dust, rocks. Well, I suspect that that is the end of Martin Brundle's run on this car today, because if you stall the engine, that is that car out of commission for the rest of that session. A new rule that was introduced at Silverstone, I believe a very controversial rule, but nonetheless, very, very bad luck indeed for Martin Brundle.
And not only did the engine take a mouthful of dust, I think Martin did as well, John. But Brundle in a carbon copy accident of what happened to Stefano Modena this morning in exactly the same chicane.
And we saw Katayama likewise doing the same thing. Well, Nigel Mansell, of course, has just come past the part of the circuit where Martin Brundle went off. Whether he was continuing on a fast lap or just happened to be coming into the pits when he came across all the dirt on the circuit, we now know that Mansell will come into the pits. There's no point in proceeding until that part of the circuit gets cleaned up. In the meantime, here is the man the majority of race fans here at Hockenheim are going to come to watch and to cheer on. And it is the first Grand Prix in Germany for Michael Schumacher. And there is enormous pressure on those very young but very strong shoulders.
Schumacher has not had the best results the last couple of races. He's, of course, finished second in Spain and in Canada. Had an accident with Ayrton Senna and then later with Stefano Modena in France. And well, I think he just finished fourth in Silverstone, and that was that, really. I mean, he flat spotted his tires on the very first lap, had to come in and get a new set of tires, and that was that.
In fact, what he did at Silverstone on that first lap, coming into Beckett's, he did flat spot his tires, but what he did was damage the underbody of the car. Now, he thought the problem, and Schumacher's done the same thing as Martin Brundle at the same part of the circuit, but he's kept it running, and he is going to live for another lap at least. But those tires, I'm sure, are useless after that spin. You could see a lot of smoke coming off them. He had the brakes on to try and keep the car under control, but it's interesting that both the Benettons have spun in that second chicane. Here we does he clip the curb?
I think
no, he just gets wide. He gets onto the dust. Understeer, 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 onto the curb. And then, because that car is running such little wing and the dust on the track, his tires got choked with dust. Well, you've seen it live here on Eurosport. Michael Schumacher, a very pretty, and I would give him pretty high marks, first of all, for keeping the car on the road, but secondly, to keeping the engine running. He is back in the pits, and this is all disaster for the Benetton team. Schumacher back in the pits. Well, this may well be a reflection of the pressure that not just that Michael Schumacher personally is under, but the team. They're trying so hard to get behind the two Williams. They know if they are behind the two McLarens, in other words, if they're on the third row of the grid, they've got little chance of getting ahead of them in the race, and maybe they're just trying that little bit too hard.
Michael Schumacher currently fifth on the 155, but that was his first flying lap. While Mika Häkkinen crosses the line. Häkkinen and Johnny Herbert both had a torrid time this morning. Gerhard Berger, he was third fastest this morning, 0.8 of a second slower than teammate Ayrton Senna. And Gerhard, I think they put an extra wing on that car. I don't think that middle wing was there this morning, John.
I think most teams, as opposed to what they did 1 week ago in test, have got a different ball game. The track conditions appear to be the same, but with the temperature, so teams tend to be trying different things. They have to find that balance between high speed and grip. Well, again, we see Michael Schumacher creeping back now. This is actually much earlier in his lap, coming through the new Ost curve. Quite a lot of understeer. This is in slow motion, naturally. And look at the bumps. You see the bump here, this final exit, this right-hand corner. Front wheel almost coming off the ground. Lots of sparks from the rear skid blocks, titanium skid blocks that protect those very precious and very, very important to the performance of a car, the carbon fiber underbody.
Gerhard Berger, well, his 125th Grand Prix, won in Canada, of course, and now starting his first flying lap once he gets out of the motordrome and back on those long, long straights. Well, we should get some really nice, pretty shots from the in-car camera, especially when we're fighting, John. Well, not we're fighting, but the drivers are fighting.
Well, we've got, I believe, 5 cars here. We'll have on-board cameras, and we're looking forward to seeing lots of really good action, and particularly in the early part of the Grand Prix when the teams and the cars will be bunched together, and particularly on this opening straight. This is the first of these 4 straights that is the quickest of these 4. Berger with Eric Comas just ahead of him. Comas having just exited the pits. Comas stays well to the right, allows Berger the line down this very quick straight. Berger, the two McLarens not as quick down this straight this morning as the two Williams, some 5 miles an hour slower than Nigel Mansell. And now Berger coming out of that first chicane. It has in fact been modified marginally. The entrance is a slightly softer, slightly quicker entrance than we have seen over the previous 2 years. But here is the most controversial circuit. On the corner on the circuit, that's the right, left, right, the Ost curve, and that corner has changed quite a lot in the last, well, let's say 12 or so years. It used to be absolutely flat out at one stage in ground effect cars. It then became too fast. They put a chicane in, and that then has remained for something like 10 years or so. But after last year, and particularly Eric Comas's horrendous and very fiery accident, it was decided to change it, make it slower. But it appears the driver's view of that corner is it is not safer. Berger almost losing control, coming through the Agip curve. You saw the car sliding, oversteer, now into the Sachs curve, fighting for grip. Look at his hands, you can see them blurring across behind the screen. And now coming into the final Opel curve, and this is very important to drive the car across the start-finish line.
Gerhard Berger's first flying lap is 1:41.300, which is faster than he went this morning, and is now second fastest behind Nigel Mansell, who's in pole. Jean Alesi is third, Mika Häkkinen fourth, and Paul Belmondo's in fifth. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back here on Eurosport, where the situation is a little changed. Nigel Mansell still on pole position, Gerhard Berger is still second, and Jean Alesi still third. Thierry Boutsen in the Ligier, you're watching him now, he's in fourth place on a 1:43.915, which is a little faster than this morning. Then teammate Eric Comas. Mika Häkkinen, a 1:44.784, which is about 2 seconds faster than he did this morning. So Lotus this morning was definitely in trouble, but is okay now. Häkkinen on 1:44, Paul Belmondo dropping down to 7th. Aguri Suzuki, every time he comes past, he hits the rev limiter in 4th or 5th gear. Stefano Modena 9th, and Michael Schumacher still in 10th. Martin Brundle 11th, Pierluigi Martini is 12th, and JJ Leto is 13th, and that's the only runners we've had so far.
And Allard, we've actually had a Senna have an accident here in our commentary booth, but in fact it was Ayrton Senna's father. He managed to fall or knock a couple of chairs down, caused consternation in the pits. But look at Gerhard Berger getting the car well and truly out of shape in that Ust curve. Got it all wrong coming in. Massive oversteer. Had to cut across the curb on the left-hand part of the corner. And, well, Gerhard Berger's not going to make much effort in this lap. It all went wrong for him out on that Ust curve, so he's recomposing himself, hoping that his tires have not picked up too much of the gravel and the rubber. Well, he's in fact coming into the pit lane. He's decided that that is the best thing to do. It is very, very critical in qualifying that you keep these tires, your race tires, as clean as possible. You don't want to get off the line. You don't want to do intentionally what you just saw Berger doing, because with the dust, the rubber, and anything else, the debris that is off the racing line, because these tires are so hot, they pick up anything, and it takes maybe a lap or longer for those tires to shred or get rid of any of the dirt that has been into the tires. So Berger back in the pits.
Schumacher back out on the circuit.
Yes, and Schumacher understeering again, just watching the car come out of that first chicane. A lot of understeer in the left-hand part of the exiting of the chicane. Now this is a slow lap, it's just a lap building up to speed. But Benetton running, I would say, the minimum amount of downforce with this car achievable to try and find the balance of very good top speed, to put them on a level with McLaren and Williams, but at the same time to try and find a balance that will enable them to get through all these, they're fiddly corners, they're Mickey Mouse corners. There's no really good corner you can get hold of and say, that was a great corner, and didn't the car work well there?
Michael Schumacher following former Mercedes junior teammate Carl Wendlinger, who of course is going to drive for the new Sauber Formula 1 team next year with a new Wilmore engine. And Schumacher, who, well, yesterday afternoon he was doing so many interviews and people are after him, and I think he's really trying to hide from the pressure maybe, John.
I spoke to his mentor, Willy Weber, who really brought Michael Schumacher into motor racing after his career in karting, and he said, John, we're only allowing 3 interviews this weekend, and they're all for television, and all of them for Eurosport as well, by the way. No, that's not quite the case, but obviously enormous focus on Schumacher this weekend. Tremendous pressure for a man in his first full season of Grand Prix racing and taking part in his first German Grand Prix. Really, he wants to keep out of the limelight as much as possible. He works very, very hard indeed to satisfy the demand of the German media and the media at large. But here, really, I feel he wants to be able just to escape as much of the pressure as possible and just focus on Sunday's Grand Prix.
Schumacher, who was 0.4 of a second slower than Nigel Mansell on the first intermediate timing point, but the second point, that is where Nigel Mansell makes a big, big improvement over everybody else. You can be 0.2 of a second behind on the first intermediate, and then suddenly you're 1.3 or maybe even more behind on the second intermediate. 0.4 it was for Schumacher on the first. What it's going to be now, and it's 1.9. I mean, a second and a half. Nigel Mansell is quicker, basically, John, round the Ust curve.
Mansell is just quicker everywhere. He just maintains his speed throughout the lap. Now you can see just behind Wendlinger, who's behind Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna, that familiar yellow helmet of Senna. Senna out on lap. Schumacher dropping that left rear wheel off the circuit down the dip. I think Schumacher is just trying to get one clean lap in. He just wants to get a time in, and then he can sort of work at that. I'm sure the team are saying to him, look, just go out and drive. You'll be quick anyway. I'm sure he'll be 5th or 6th quickest at the end of this lap. Well, in fact, he's 3rd. So that was a lap from Schumacher, which was not as spectacular as we have seen throughout the morning, but at least he's got a time. And Ayrton Senna has now gone and recorded second quickest time, 1:40.340, and that is 0.6 of a second quicker than Senna went this morning.
Ayrton Senna on his second flying lap, and whoa, Damon Hill. We saw Eric van der Poel spin this morning, but this is a bit of a repair bill for the Brabham team.
Yes, that may well just make contact. Well, he's managed it, and he's done very well. I have to say, not that he had very much to do with it. Oh, he's in the tower wall finally. Well, he certainly had an exciting little low flight trip over those sand or gravel traps. But in the meantime, back with Ayrton Senna. And Senna is pushing on. He is not on a resting lap. Coming down the third of these 4 straights, down to what is, in my opinion, the best of the chicanes at Hockenheim. 320 kilometers per hour, just over 200 miles an hour. He's got Johnny Herbert ahead of him. He will not want to catch Herbert too quickly, because obviously that could interfere with a lap time.
Well, he's on a slow lap, John, because he's already 1:21 and coming into the stadium. There's no way he's going to be very quick on this particular lap. He might even come into the pits, actually. But Nigel Mansell is still the fastest man out on the circuit. 2 seconds exactly faster than Ayrton Senna. Then it's Gerhard Berger, who's a second slower than his teammate. Riccardo Patrese is now in 4th. Michael Schumacher is in 5th. Jean Alesi's dropped down to 6th. Eric Gomez is 7th, just in front of Jerry Woodson. Aguri Suzuki 9th, and the fastest of the Lotus drivers is Mika Häkkinen.
Well, I was going to say, let's just compare the relative performance of a Honda V12 and the Ford HP V8, but look at this. Oh dear, very nasty indeed. Patrese, and well and truly tagged from behind by Paul Belmondo, and that is a right front damaged, and that car in the gravel trap and out of the gravel trap and making its way on down towards, well, you can see it again, Belmondo getting it all wrong. This is the first chicane. The gravel trap is there to stop cars doing what we're seeing Belmondo's car doing. The left, right front wheels, you see, totally out of control. Steering arm broken. Belmondo, well, he's
saying something.
I don't know what he's doing at all. I don't know why he didn't just pull the car off there. There we are, back with Ayrton Senna.
"24 minutes into the session, and unless Nigel Mansell goes out again and tries to improve on that 38.340, which undoubtedly he will, this is the pole position time. Michele Alboreto just improved to 13th, and Alboreto this morning was 12th fastest. And Germany, 1985, was the last Grand Prix Michele Alboreto won, and that was in a Ferrari, and that one was held at Nürburgring.
Yes, and that was the year when Michele Alboreto was a challenger for the title. He was battling for the title with Alain Prost, and the title finally did fall to Mr. Prost. It was his first World Championship victory, but for Michele Alboreto, fate has not been quite so generous. But 1992 has seen a comeback for Michele Alboreto. There's a damaged bodywork.
Gianni Morbidelli.
One of the Minardis, and that is part of the bodywork has just pulled and peeled back. And that car will be coming back slowly to the pits. Well, look at the gravel. Look at that. Gravel all over. And somebody, we can see...
Oh, Johnny.
Johnny, and that's somebody else. There was a lot of gravel there in the first place. There's now going to be even more. So really, anybody who wants to be out doing a serious lap time is absolutely wasting their time. The circuit getting very, very badly covered. Look at the gravel. Those are just sharp chips. Very unfortunate, because it causes a lot of difficulty for tires. You can pick up one of those stones, it gets pushed into the tire, you get a deflation. Well, there we are, back with Morbidelli cruising slowly back to the pits with his bodywork flapping a red flag.
Stop.
Yes, indeed, the session very wisely, I suspect, because there is so much gravel now up at the Us curve that in reality it has been considered to be too much to allow these cars to continue qualifying in safety. So red flag out, all the cars will come back. The session has been stopped, the track cleared. And look, bodywork, this is from the Minardi. Bodywork lying, this is the out straight up to the first chicane.
After 26 minutes and 1 second in the session, Nigel Mansell was on pole position, and there's no real activity here, apart from people picking bits and pieces up. Ayrton Senna, as I said, 2 seconds slower. Gerhard Berger is in third. Well, there's no bodywork left on that car. It's Morbidelli's car. It's just gone. Berger is in third. Riccardo Patrese is fourth. Michael Schumacher fifth. Jean Alesi is sixth. Seventh, Gomez. Eighth, Boutsen. Ninth, the Cesaris. 10th, Aguri Suzuki. 11th, Mika Hakkinen. 12th, Olivier Grouillard. 13th, Paul Belmondo, who we just saw trying to get rid of his right front wheel on the back of Riccardo Patrese's car. Michele Alboreto is 14th. JJ Leto is 15th. 16th, Gabriele Tarquini. 17th, Pierluigi Martini. 18th, Carl Wendlinger. 19th, Stefano Modena. 20th, Eric van der Poel, who went quicker than this morning. Then it's Mauricio Guzman in 21st. 22nd, Johnny Herbert. 23rd, Damon Hill. 24th, Alessandro Zanardi. 25th, Martin Brundle, and that's all we've had out so far. Gianni Morbidelli was just about to go out, but he hasn't got a time yet. That's the situation. We'll be back after a short break here at Hockenheim. Welcome back here at Eurosport, where we're waiting for the first qualifying session to start again. It's been stopped after 26 minutes because a lot of debris on the circuit. And John, I think if all the drivers survive that first corner, I think the question would be, is that corner going to survive the first corner?
Well,
sorry, the first lap.
The first lap, I think that it is obviously going to be a troublesome area. The corner is not very popular. General consensus amongst the drivers is that they don't like it, basically. But what we have seen from this morning's session, and we've really had illustrated to us very clearly in this qualifying session this afternoon, is that if somebody goes off, they are going to shower the circuit in gravel, in dirt, and make it very, very difficult indeed for cars behind to get through without sliding off. Now, Martin Brundle's car we saw being towed back in. Here we have Paul Belmondo. This is, where are we looking at? This is
that chicane, but I think it's
just different angle.
It's before we saw Belmondo take his right front wheel off.
But the problem has been a lot of gravel has been thrown onto the circuit dust. You can see how bumpy it is on the exit. So I suspect that during the race, this area of the circuit will be troublesome. And if gravel or gravel chips get thrown onto the track, the problem we just talked about before the session was stopped, before we have a restart, is that any one of those little chips can get pushed into the surface of the tire, or even cut a sidewall of the tire. So very, very concerning, principally for Goodyear, because they do not want to have anything on the racetrack that may cause a problem with one of their tires.
That's Mauricio Guzman in the Jordan team, who had a very troublesome morning warm-up. And look at the sparks that car is generating. I mean, that's the most we've seen so far, I think.
Well, the Jordan team run the car as low as they can. Literally, the car, the bodywork is dragging on the ground. That's why it's got so many sparks. Well, here again we see what went wrong from, this is Michael Schumacher. That's Brundle, in fact, it is Brundle, as the caption was wrong. Brundle lost control. We've seen a lot of cars spin. This is what I call the third chicane. In fact, it is the second true chicane. And all that dust, now, they've got the car back. We saw Brundle's car being pulled back into the pits on a tow rope. But I don't think you can use that car this afternoon, because there was so much dust, so much stones in the dust, that the airbox, and although there's a gauze protecting the engine from debris going in the airbox, something must have gotten into the engine. Could not have done it any good at all. Well, the Ford engineers will be looking very closely into that engine. And remember that Ford are using the 7 Series engine here this weekend, because this is an engine circuit. It's a top-end engine circuit. What you're looking for is maximum horsepower. The drivability that was maybe more essential at Silverstone 2 weekends ago isn't quite such a factor here. You're just looking for maximum power. So those 7 Series engines are being used by the Benetton team. They, of course, have got exclusive use of that 7 Series engine with its pneumatic valve system. Both 6 and 7 Series of the Ford HB use that system. Well, here we are back at that troublesome Ost curve. See Karl Wendlinger coming over the camera that's mounted in the curb. You can just see the amount of debris that's on the camera lens.
It's very nice slow-mo of Nigel Mansell here, bouncing over the curbs, but that car doesn't seem to bounce as much when you come out of the corner, John.
That is one, and I emphasize only one, of the benefits of active ride suspension. The control that can be built into the computer, the onboard computer that ultimately monitors every action the car takes. Now it's very, very bumpy indeed on the exit of the Ost curve. You can even see the Williams, you can see Mansell's head, a bit like a nodding dog in the back of somebody's Ford Cortina, wasn't it?
Well, he's still fastest though with that 1:38.340. Sat on his third flying lap of the afternoon session here in Hockenheim, where the temperature is very high indeed, and the track temperature will only get hotter, so I don't know whether we're going to see faster times. So we see the circuit layout with that long straight coming back out of the forest, being pushed back to his garage. Nigel, who was very quick to put his car first in line, but I think he thinks it's a bit too hot out there and like to get some nice cool comfort in his Williams garage, which is exactly opposite our commentary position. Mechanics pushing the car back. It's going to be the 16th Grand Prix here in Hockenheim, and we've only had three-time winners. One was Ayrton Senna, and the other one, Nelson Piquet. And Nigel Mansell's first victory here in Germany came last year. But he is on pole position. The session will start in a couple of minutes' time, and we'll be back as soon as it starts here on Eurosport. Welcome back here at Hockenheim, where Ukio Katayama has just driven into the pits backwards on the back of his truck. There we see him waving at people as well. And Michael Schumacher trying to concentrate to improve on his current 5th position on the grid behind Riccardo Patrese, but he is a long way behind the Williams Renault. 1:41.4 for Riccardo and 1:42.1 for Schumacher, so that is a big gap. But we've seen improvements from nearly all the drivers, so either conditions have improved and the track's probably a bit cleaner than it was this morning. They had a safety car, and I think in about a couple of minutes' time, John, we should see racing cars out on the circuit. We haven't been given a time yet when it's all going to happen, but I suppose very soon we will see proper racing cars or Formula One cars out on the circuit.
Well, we're looking at a start in about 7 minutes' time at 10:02 European time, 10:01 in the UK, and that's now just been put up on our Tag Heuer Olivetti screen. This is where we get all the information that we give you. We can keep you in touch with all the laps that every driver does, and also the top 26, the actual positions. So some 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes, the circuit will be reopened. Some of those 3,000 teams may welcome a slightly later qualifying session, practice session first of all, of course, because hopefully the air may be a little bit less hot, and it's very important for the 3,000 drivers also to maximize the engine performance as it is for the Formula engines to try and get down these very long straights as quickly as possible. The time, and it probably has advantages, particularly on a high-speed circuit like Hockenheim, in as much as what Williams were able to do. The reason that the Williams are so quick down the straight is not just because of their V10 Renault engine, it's because within the system they're able to trim out the car, and on circuits that have got long straights, Hockenheim
fangen noch einen nachdenklichen Riccardo Patrese ein. Ich meine, wenn Riccardo Patrese sich seine Zeiten anschaut, 3 Sekunden und 1 Zehntel langsamer als die seines Teamgefährten Nigel Mansell. Und in diesem Jahr war er ja einige Male ganz dicht dran oder gar vor Mansell. Also dass den erfahrenen Italiener sicherlich die Nachrichten bringen. Aber er hat ja noch 94 Minuten und noch das abschließende Training morgen Tag. Während unser Freund Riccardo Patrese sich jetzt
Well, this session will restart on a very nice clean circuit, so there could be quite a number of cars out there instantly. It's going to restart in just a fraction over 2 minutes' time. We should see a lot of cars going out almost immediately. It could be very crowded out there, taking advantage of what is a clean circuit, something that Nigel Mansell did and has done on a number of occasions so far this year, getting out early in the session, not too many cars out there, and taking advantage, as I said, of the fact that the circuit is clean as well.
Another team, and I must say predominantly, I mean, a British team. He started his Grand Prix career at Leighton House, and in '88 had some tremendous races and really illustrated what a good race driver and how fast a driver he can be. But maybe his nature and his character needs to be in a team which gives him that sense of self-belief, self-esteem, self-confidence. Being at Ferrari, you've got to be fairly tough, fairly capable of withstanding the kind of pressure that the media in Italy generates. You've got to be very thick-skinned. Skin like a rhinoceros is pretty ideal, I would have said. And I don't think Ivan Capelli is that kind of person. He's much more sensitive. And really, it's been a wasted year, been a damaging year to Capelli's career.
Riccardo Patrese starting his 234th Grand Prix here on Sunday. And that's, of course, a record. He's the most experienced Formula One driver of all. He's won 5 Grand Prix, 7 pole positions, 12 fastest laps, and 245 points to date. And his best result in the World Championship was 3rd in 1989, and of course last year behind teammate Nigel Mansell. He could go one better this year. The Williams team not being challenged by anybody in the Constructors' World Championship. 116 points to Camel Benetton Ford in second, 42. Marlboro McLaren Honda 38, and then Ferrari 13 points. Lotus is 5th with 7.
Restart to the session.
The restart here in Hockenheim of the qualifying session that was stopped after 26 minutes and 1 second. This is Gerhard Berger's car, who's currently in 3rd place. And one of the first drivers out was going to be Nigel Mansell, because he put his car at the head of the queue, but he got pushed back into the garage. And it's going to be a busy time now, John.
Circuit, yes, will be busy initially. I'm pleased to see a lot of cars going out at the reopening of the circuit, because it will need cars out to clear away the dust that remains in the circuit. All the gravel has been cleared away, but there will be a lot of dust, and in particular up at the Ost curve. So the cars going out singularly, they come down to the pit exit, they've got to stop. The tires are checked by marshals. There's a coating on every set of tires. Each car allowed only 2 sets per qualifying session. And if those numbers don't correspond with those on the sheet with the inspector, then you're not allowed out, or the time that you do will be disallowed. And Stefano Modena, probably the lead driver in the Cecil Jordan Yamaha team, and really a very difficult year indeed after such a wonderful season in 1991, the debut year of the Jordan team. And really the problem has to lie principally with the V12 Yamaha engine. The reliability of the engine and the performance has been disappointing. And look at the rear wing in that car. There is virtually no rear wing whatsoever. You can see the very, very narrow chord on the first part of the wing, the flap itself at a very shallow angle, and just at the very back you can see that little sort of, we call it a gurney flap. It's a little 90-degree flap. So very, very little rear wing indeed. There's no intermediate plane wing on that Jordan at all. And that car is probably running the lowest amount of downforce of any car here this weekend. And it's all done in an effort to achieve a reasonable top speed. Now, in fact, the team did a pretty good job in getting a high or reasonable top speed. They were doing 202 miles an hour this morning. The average was probably around about 203, 204, the exception being Mansell and Patrese, who were 209 and 206. But the penalty you pay is a loss of grip.
It's not Mauricio Guzman looking at us, the caption says, but Stefano Modena, who's made his debut in Australia in 1987. Done 65 Grand Prix, and in Canada 1991 was his best result when he finished second. And he qualified on the front row once, and that was last year in Monaco, alongside Ayrton Senna.
Yes, at that time he had V10, well, Mugen power, let's call it, rather than Honda power.
And the Pirelli qualifying tyres, of course.
Yes, and of course on the street circuit those tyres were absolutely magic. Well, Modena now coming out to complete a lap, 1 minute 47.517 of no significance whatsoever. And I suspect that that's just due to the reacclimatization, getting back into your car after that 30-minute break. When the track was cleaned, the cars that were all over the circuit, from breakdowns, from accidents, from spins, they were brought back in as well. Martin Brundle's car was brought back in. I'm not clear, I'm not quite sure what the ruling says. If your car, you stole the car after a spin, that car is no longer allowed to come take part in a session. Well, that session was stopped, it was red flagged. And I'm going to have to go and check up and see whether that means that Martin Brundle's car, if it was usable, could be used, or does he have to now wait until Michael Schumacher has finished using his spare car so as Martin Brundle can continue. It's very important for the team to get both drivers out. Brundle is out now. We're looking at him coming through the Sachs curve. I suspect that is the Schumacher spare car.
Well, looking at the Benettons, this morning only 3 laps for Riccardo Patrese, John, who had a problem with the plumbing on the active right suspension. And one of the problems that they could not fix it in time was that the guy who really knows what's going on is a guy called Ian Pearce. He's watching this in the conference center, and one of the Williams mechanics just walks up to us and says, can he please phone the motorhome because we need some information from him. So Ian Pearce in the Williams conference center, if you're watching, please phone the team because they're in problems.
Well, Eurosport is here to provide a service to the public at large and also to Formula One. So if Ian Pearce is listening, please get to a telephone as quickly as possible. The Williams teams need you desperately.
Well, it didn't stop Nigel Mansell doing that 1:38.340, did it?
Well, Nigel has actually just returned to the pits. He went out, made a lap, has come back in. His car will be pushed back into the shade, the welcome shade, I must say, of the garage. In the meantime, here we see Martin Brundle, obviously anxious to get a lap, having made a mess of it. And somebody has done the same thing.
Well, Martin Brundle
has come through, but his lap has been compromised completely because of a spinner, and it's Johnny Herbert.
It's his first spin of the day.
Yes, and this corner, this second chicane, has been a real problem for a lot of people, and a lot of surprising people.
I think this is his third chicane, John.
Well, it is the third chicane, but it's in fact officially called the second chicane. The Os curve, which I call a chicane, is called the Os curve. Well, look at Johnny Herbert, completely and utterly offline. He had more chance of being struck by lightning than getting around that corner, I must say. Johnny Herbert, I don't know why he didn't lift off, because you were so wide in that right-hand part of the corner, you had no chance whatsoever.
Well, that's the third time we see Johnny Herbert spin today, and that's also the third time we see someone go off like this in this corner. Stefano Modena this morning, Martin Brundle earlier in the session, and now Johnny Herbert. But Martin Brundle, who had to compromise that lap, is now 16th on a 1:45.498, and he's not given up yet.
All these spins, Allard, it has to be teams are running the minimum amount of downforce, but also it's partly, I would say, and Martin Brundle again almost getting the car, the back end coming around just on the exit of the left-hander in that first chicane. It's a combination of running very, very low downforce indeed to get down the straights quickly, but also because we're qualifying on race tyres. Previously here at Hockenheim, you could get away with a low downforce because you had the sticky qualifying tyres. It's catching people out, and it's catching out experienced people as well as less experienced people.
Martin Brundle's second intermediate time is going to be, well, way slower than Nigel Mansell's, 3.7 seconds. So Martin probably en route to an improvement of his own personal best. A top speed of 313 kilometers. That's not very high. That's about 195 miles an hour down that straight.
Well, if you look down the time, the speeds, the maximum speeds we saw from this morning, that would make him virtually, well, in fact, the slowest car.
Well, he probably comes into the pits then. Alboreto coming past. Alboreto, who's in 15th at the moment, and there Martin Brundle, he's not coming into the pits. He's not going to improve on his best.
Well, we saw Brundle, remember, on early into that lap, he had a wide slide and in that first chicane. So from the early part of the lap, it wasn't going to be a particularly good lap. There's still probably a lot of dust at the exit of the second chicane. The return chicane, I think it's probably easier to call it that. So Martin hoping to improve on his current 14th place. His teammate Michael Schumacher presently 5th, and he would just like to slot in onto that third row alongside Schumacher.
Coming past start-finish now is Gerhard Berger, who is a second slower than Ayrton Senna, and definitely wants to get a little closer. And for those people, for those McLaren fans, I think it's good that they split the Williams pair. Nigel Mansell first, and then Riccardo Patrese in 4th place. Michael Schumacher is 5th, and Jean Alesi is still 6th. And again, we see Gerhard losing half a second on Nigel Mansell's best on that first intermediate point. But now we've got to wait. It's 3 chicanes, 2 long straights. He's got to keep that momentum up and see how much he's losing on Nigel Mansell when he gets to the return chicane on that long straight.
I suspect that it is at this point really that the benefit that Nigel has with the actively sprung Williams really comes into play. A non-active car like a McLaren, or in fact virtually the rest of the field, probably cannot get the power down as early as Mansell is doing, and therefore the drive and all the way down this long straight down to the next chicane is really, I think, significant in Mansell and Williams and the Patrese package. That is where I believe they make up that extra second or so over the competition.
But Berger is on a very good lap. He's 1.5 seconds down on Nigel Mansell during that second intermediate point. So he should be able to better his personal best, which stands at 1:41.300. I think he might just get into the 140s. No, he's not. He's not even improved on his personal best time. Jean Alesi locking up the wheels.
Well, he locked up both the front wheels, but I'm very impressed by the Ferrari under braking, because I can assure you that seeing both those wheels lock on exactly at the same time and release exactly at the same time indicate that the corner weights in the Ferrari are very accurate at least. Mr. Katayama, we've seen him spin quite a lot. We saw him coming back on the back of a flatbed truck, and he's going to have another trip on the back of a flatbed truck if he stalls the engine, that is. But well, has he kept it running this time?
Had plenty of practice.
Yep. Again, a car that's running a very, very low downforce setup. Katayama, his first time, we believe. I don't know if he did a 3000 race here years before, but certainly his first Formula One race at Hockenheim. And he is another of the drivers that has been caught out more than once here on Friday.
While Gerhard Berger goes around that return chicane, trying to better his grid position. Ayrton Senna just left the pits on a new set of tires, so he's a man worth watching at the moment. Ayrton Senna, once he gets past start finish, of course, but first we want to see what Berger's time is. And Mansell just in the pits, very relaxed. Well, he doesn't have to do anything. He's 2 seconds quicker than Ayrton Senna, and I don't think there's any possible way Senna is going to beat Mansell here in qualifying.
Well, I think also Nigel Mansell is sitting there knowing full well that with all the rubbish that has been thrown onto the circuit, that the circuit itself is not as quick as it was, and he's got no reason to wish to go out. If the information coming from the pits indicates that the circuit has improved in the remaining some 20 minutes of this session left, he may decide to go back out again. He may just do it for himself, but there's no advantage in doing it. He's got a 2-second advantage over Ayrton Senna, who currently is second quickest. I would have thought that really the team want to focus as much as possible at this point on getting Riccardo Patrese onto the front row of the grid to join Nigel Mansell. That would be, if I was in the Williams team right now, the area I would be concentrating on most.
Martin Brundle back in the pits in his spare Benetton. The other one being made Dust 3. And there's the Benetton pits. And Ayrton Senna, well, he left the pits a long time ago, so they kept him there for quite a long time, I suppose.
Well, there you see Senna with his fresh tyres. You can still see the stickers on the tyres, and now in car with Ayrton Senna. This is the first of the 4 straights. This is the quickest of the 4. We saw Senna this morning doing 204 miles an hour. And the team have been fiddling around. They've been trying to balance speed against time, against grip, and running a lot less wing than we're used to seeing, or accustomed to seeing McLaren run. They've got the most powerful engine, but it isn't necessarily the best engine. It's got a lot of power at the very top. I'm talking around about 14,600 RPM. But of course, you need to have a little bit in the middle, particularly in corners like this, to be able to get the car moving as quickly as possible. But probably producing somewhere in the region, and this is only a guess on my part, but probably I would estimate around about 820 horsepower. I understand through the grapevine that Riccardo Patrese believes the engine that is in his car, the Renault V10, has got 804 horsepower. So I suspect the Honda might have 15 or 20 horsepower more than Patrese, which makes it all sound about right.
While Ayrton Senna tries to improve on his personal best, and Riccardo Patrese just left the pits. Not qualified for the moment are Damon Hill, Alessandro Zanardi and Gianni Morbidelli. That means that Ivan Capelli hasn't been out yet and is the only driver who has not been out on the circuit yet. And it also means, John, I think that the Minardi team is in trouble, because both cars are out of the race at the moment, but both drivers have not completed a single lap. And of course, Gianni Morbidelli, we saw earlier on trying to get rid of all his bodywork. In the paddock also was Christian Fittipaldi, who said he will be back for the Monza test and then back in a Grand Prix car in Spa, and that's what it stands at the moment.
Well, as I see Christian Fittipaldi walking around, he's still wearing a neck support, and that will remain until the doctors feel it is the right time to let him take it off. But of course, getting back into a Grand Prix car, having not driven one for some month or 5 weeks, those neck muscles they don't get weak, they just get out of condition. So he will suffer it. He may well, in fact, be advised to wear a neck support in the early runs he has in his Minardi Lamborghini. And, well, we're hoping to see Christian Fittipaldi back at Spa. Michele Alboreto now into the top 10. He is, in fact, in 10th place, 1 minute 44.578.
Ayrton Senna is 1 second behind Nigel Mansell at the moment, and if the Jordan can keep out of the way and Ayrton can get a clear run, then he should be into the 139s, which is a mighty effort by the world champion.
Yes, and his friend Maurizio Gugelmin in the Jordan pulled well over to the right to let Senna get through, but there is a little bit more traffic ahead of him, but it's not going to interfere with this lap. So can Senna break that 100-second bracket? In fact, it was Riccardo Patrese. Well, just coming into the stadium, all the good work he had done just drifted away. He has improved marginally, 140.331. He's now just 1.9 or so seconds behind Nigel Mansell. Barely improved by a hundredth of a second. And now he's pulling over to the left and returning the compliment to Guzman. Guzman going through and sparks galore as Mauricio comes down to the first chicane. Right, left, then right, hard accelerating onto that second straight. In the meantime, now we have Riccardo Patrese coming down to the Us curve. Doesn't look to be particularly serious from Patrese, but it's difficult to judge with this car sometimes. It's just so deceptive, the smoothness of the car over those very bumpy parts of the circuit.
Riccardo Patrese is down on Nigel Mansell's time, but only 0.7 of a second, so oh dear. Well, he was nearly the fourth one.
Yes, Riccardo Patrese came through the return chicane, turning right, the back end stepped out. He had to correct it, probably came off the throttle, corrected it and got it underway again. Last 2, maybe 3/10 of a second due to that. Now coming through the Sachs curve, third gear and fourth gear, coming up to this double right-hand Opel curve, and then the final push across the start-finish line. So Patrese not breaking the 1 minute 40-second bracket, 40.501. It is an improvement, but still just under 0.2 of a second away from Ayrton Senna. Riccardo Patrese is going to have to do better than this.
Well, we look at the top 8. We can see both the Ligiers in the top 8. 7th, Jerry Boutsen. 8th, Eric Comas. And for Boutsen, it's his best qualifying performance this year with the Ligier. And I think, who said it was not an engine circuit here? But here, we saw this morning with Zanardi, and he does it again.
Yes, this time he's a little bit luckier. Well, is he going to he's going to put it in the tires back? Oh, he just missed the end of the tire wall. Well, Alessandro Zanardi made a comment to me yesterday, and I have to say he's got to do a bit better personally if he wants me to believe him. He was very lucky indeed not to slide into the tires. That was on the inside of the corner. So Alessandro finding it, this Minardi not such an easy prospect as he did last year in the Jordan. Andrea de Cesaris.
Hallo Bohn.
Well, we seem to have lost John Watson for the moment, but certainly this first qualifying session here at Hockenheim, breaking rather with the tradition that we've seen so far this season. We have a problem certainly on the front row for the Williams team, because they are going to be very, very keen that Riccardo Patrese should join teammate Nigel Mansell. But at the moment, that man Ayrton Senna is once again getting on the front row with the McLaren. We saw earlier that it really is vintage Senna when the man's got a problem. We know that the chassis doesn't work as well. We know the Honda's got power here at Hockenheim, but the way Senna threw that car around on there, he's a very, very determined man. And of course, at the moment, it's a particularly interesting time of the year. Many of the drivers out there are under negotiations, or should I say, in negotiations with teams for the forthcoming '93 season, and so they'll be particularly keen to do well. And Ayrton Senna is one of those. There have been a lot of rumors around in the last couple of weeks that Honda are going to quit Formula One. We're waiting, in fact, for a statement in August from the Honda president, motorsport president, as to whether this does in fact happen. But certainly Ayrton Senna at the moment will be considering options. The McLaren team, Senna and Berger, they've had several negotiations, we understand, with other engine manufacturers at the moment. But of course, if Honda pulls out, it leaves them in a particularly difficult situation. Everybody, of course, wants to see the prancing horse up there. And at the moment, unfortunately, the engine seems to be going well, but the chassis is certainly not meeting anywhere near the demands of that Italian team. Well, with Nigel Mansell still sitting in the garage, but on the front row of the grid provisionally for Germany, we're going to take a quick break. Well, welcome back to Hockenheim, and we see, in fact, we join there with Nigel Mansell on another lap, but right at this moment, it's one of the Sassel cars that has gone into the barriers there and certainly done itself a pretty irreparable pretty irreparable damage. It's the Stefano Modena car, and really the weekend so far is not starting off any better for the Jordan Sassel team than it has done so far this season. We see there Stefano Modena returning dejectedly to the pits, knowing that certainly for day one of qualifying, his misfortune continues. Stefano is a man who I think really needs to be right on top emotionally, and when things are down, his head goes down, and it doesn't help the team at all in that situation. Anyway, let's go back now with the man who certainly hasn't got a head down, and that is Nigel Mansell, driving as superbly as normal in that resplendent red 5. We see Mansell now coming up behind Michele Alboreto in the footwork. And Mansell will be out there in the last 5 minutes of the first qualifying session to try and improve on his 1 minute 38.340, which, although at this stage of the proceedings gives him a comfortable pole position, as they say in motor racing, tomorrow is another day. And Mansell will be keen, if he can, to impose, and maybe we're going to see a sub 38-minute lap from Nigel. This morning in the free practice session, Mansell's car was clocked on the straight at 336.35 kilometers an hour. But now we see Nigel returning to the pits. So unless he gets something changed on the car very quickly and back out again, I doubt if we're going to see Nigel Mansell return. What I'd like to see in a minute is the Riccardo Patrese car. I can see the checkered flag there is hovering. And Riccardo Patrese will be anxious, if he can today, to get on the front row alongside his teammate. One of the problems, of course, with the two-day qualifying is that if it should rain, and we've certainly seen a couple of situations in the last, or the Grand Prix before Britain in France, where rain did affect the times. So today Mansell will be going back to his motorhome, a very, very happy man. We see him there being pushed back, in fact, into the Williams pit by the mechanics. And once again, we have provisional pole, Nigel Mansell, red 5 for the Williams Renault team. In second place on the grid, still Ayrton Senna. Riccardo Patrese at the moment on the inside of the second row of the grid, alongside Gerhard Berger. And we have Michael Schumacher. And we'll wait in a minute. The times will be put up, in fact, by the circuit. We can see there one of the Benettons. I can't quite see at the moment. Yes, in fact, it's Martin Brundle. Probably a little unhappy today. He has had 2 tremendous Grand Prix. He seemed to have overcome the problem that he had in terms of surmounting the Schumacher challenge. Those who've spoken to Martin reckon that he'd been trying particularly hard. And talk of the devil, there is the young German, very much the star of the show here, of course, in Germany for his home Grand Prix. But that isn't the situation that he'll be relishing. The car sitting at the side. So let's finally run through there with Nigel Mansell on pole with a 138.3, followed by Ayrton Senna in the McLaren. We're running through now to Brundle there down in 9th place, Capelli and the Ferrari down in 11th. Now let's look at the critical part at the back. Johnny Herbert, a disappointed man there in the Lotus, I'm sure, in 24th place, 146.1, well off the pace, but of course had 2 major spins today in the session. And now we come down to the bottom section with Damon Hill and Van der Poel in the Brabhams, probably not surprisingly the slowest so far. But Katayama there, the LaRousse driver, won't be getting too much sleep tonight. He'll be worrying. You see Nigel Mansell putting on his sponsor's cap. I'm sure going back to his wife Roseanne and a relaxed evening, knowing that unless somebody does something very, very special tomorrow, that 138.340 for Nigel Mansell is going to almost certainly assure him of pole position. We'll be back tomorrow for the second day of qualifying for the Hockenheim Formula One World Championship Grand Prix.